Hello, fellow working class comrades, and welcome to another edition of Ralphie the Revolutionary. I'm your host, Ralphie the Revolutionary, and on today's edition, I want to talk about the importance of our democracy and why we need to make our system more democratic. But first, I think we need to talk about morality. You know, Bernie Sanders, I think he's officially the leader of the working class right now. He made a really good point recently. He tweeted that we cannot have a moral society when so few have so much and so many have so little. Yeah, you know, a lot of times when people talk about capitalism versus socialism, a lot of the free market people, they like to talk about economics. They like to talk about how the poorest of the poor in society get wealthier, their standards of living go up. And yeah, sure, maybe the standard of living for most, if not all people under capitalism goes up. But relatively speaking, the wealth is not proportionate. It is not equal. And that's not fair. You know, I think Second Thought, the YouTuber Second Thought, who's a real voice for the working class, he talked a lot about morality in this brilliant video from November of 2020 titled, "You're Probably Already a Socialist." But he touches upon morality in this video.
Take a minute to consider which of these worldviews is more appealing to you. I'd wager that most people are more concerned with their material realities than winning empty symbolic victories. You want to see tangible benefits to your own life and the lives of your neighbors. People have economic concerns, and they need to be addressed. We inherently understand this.
We inherently understand this, guys.
We need to look out for ourselves and each other, and that's a key pillar of socialism. I think there's a lot to be said for things we inherently understand. If you were to ask a 7-year-old what we should do about people who don't have a place to live, or enough food to eat, or the medicine they need to live, what do you think they'd say? They'd say we should give those people what they need.
Yeah, guys, we need to organize society around the mentality of a 7-year-old.
Humans are a social and altruistic species.
Yeah, humans are a social and altruistic species.
We all start out with these morals, and then we're slowly indoctrinated.
Yeah, we all start out with these morals. When you come into the world, you know what's good.
Into capitalism as we grow. We all start out with these morals, and then we're slowly indoctrinated into capitalism as we grow.
Yeah, I think Second Thought makes a good point. That we start off morally good, and then capitalism forces us to be immoral. And that's the problem with capitalism. It's a system of the selfish pursuit of profit. Profit. Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks talked about this too recently. Anna Kasparian, who's a real voice for the working class over at the Young Turks, real credible news organization. She made a segment about billionaire Mark Cuban and how he's joined Big Pharma. And for those who don't know who Mark Cuban is one of these investors on that show Shark Tank. And he's presented as this hero, as this wonderful guy, as he takes over small, struggling businesses from working class families. Just another member of the top 1% monopolizing the economy. And that's not good. That's not good. And a greedy corporation like the Walt Disney Company, who owns ABC, they make a big spectacle out of it. Out of the top 1%, the billionaire class monopolizing the economy like it's something to be celebrated. This is how your consent is manufactured, guys. I mean, it's called Noam Chomsky. Read up on it. But you have a bunch of neoliberal bootlickers praising Mark Cuban because he's trying to lower prescription drug prices. But Annika Sparian had a really good segment on this.
Businesses and make money, but he claims that's not what this is about. Cuban told Forbes last year, when he originally became involved in the creation of a low-cost drug company, that he wanted to show capitalism can be compassionate. And what I find so fascinating about that statement is how easily members of corporate media just regurgitate it verbatim. In fact, here's an example. Let's watch the video.
You know, I think a lot of people don't kind of know how it might work in other countries, that in countries like the UK, like Canada, France, the government comes in and negotiates the price, right? There's a government body that does that.
Yeah, it's called democracy.
That may make a capitalist like you, Mark, shudder a little bit. And I know that one of the things that you wanted to prove is that capitalism can be compassionate here. So I want you to talk to us about costplusdrugs.com.
We discussed putting together a pharmacy specifically for generic drugs where we go out and we buy them from the same manufacturers that others are buying from, but really keep our costs low and just sell it at a 15% markup.
15% markup. You know, they ought to call him, you know what they really should have called Mark Cuban? They should call him Mark Up Cuban. That was a good one, right, guys?
Compassionate capitalism. Now, when one of our viewers asked me to share my thoughts on this story, before I had actually read into it or really understood what it was about, the question was, what do you think? Is this a good thing or is this a scam? And what I want you guys to understand about capitalism is the system and what the incentives and disincentives are, how the system works, right? So compassionate capitalism doesn't really make sense because capitalism isn't about compassion. It's not about morality.
Yeah, it's not moral.
The system is about maximizing profits.
Profit. But this is a problem with capitalism. It forces everyone in society, including those who are trying to be compassionate, it forces everyone into being immoral. I really don't get why everyone is tripping over themselves to lick the boots of Mark Up Cuban. Like, yeah, sure. Mark Up Cuban might be offering lower drug prices than other players, might be offering lower drug prices than Big Pharma, but he could be offering even lower drug prices without that 15% markup. As Anna said, Mark Cuban has to make money for his shareholders. You know, imagine if we as a society, imagine a society where everyone got the stuff they needed without having to pay a 15% markup for their basic needs. You know, a lot of times you have these free market advocates, these neoliberal bootlickers talking about how taxation is theft whenever working class heroes like Bernie Sanders want to raise taxes on the ultra super mega wealthy and the billionaire class. and take that money to make sure everyone gets their basic needs met. But when a pharmaceutical company, when you need medication, and a pharmaceutical company charges you 15% more than what they really need, how is that not theft as well? That doesn't make sense. You know, it would be like if you were on a boat. Imagine if you were on a boat in like an ocean or a big lake, and you came across someone just treading in the water, stranded, treading, struggling to stay afloat as rough waves are going over their head. You know how it goes. And they're just waiting to be rescued. Imagine you had one of those life preservers with a rope tied to it. Would you really ask them for money? Would you really ask them for money before throwing them a life preserver and bringing them to safety? I didn't think so. Imagine if you were struggling to stay afloat and someone on a boat asking for you for a credit card or Bitcoin or whatever before they pull you to safety. That's capitalism. You gotta pay for basic needs like food and shelter, medication, and electricity, and transportation, and clothes. Does a society that makes you work so that you can pay for your existence sound like a moral society? I didn't think so. Now, a bunch of neoliberal bootlickers like to talk a big game about how competition and the profit motive leads to innovation, leads to lower prices and more abundance. Like when Markup Cuban is trying to do, and yeah, sure, with the profit motive and competition, you might get new medication, you might get new treatments, you might get abundance of medication. But again, you have to ask yourself, this is a point I constantly bring up, would you rather live in a society with abundance and fancy technology and innovation, or would you rather live in a society that's fair? Frankly, I would rather live in a society without stuff like fancy mRNA technology and laser eye surgery and cheap bottles of aspirin and ibuprofen if it meant that society was more equal. You know, this was what was so magnificent about a country like the Soviet Union. Someone made this point recently on Twitter. Eric Blank, as you can see, he's an assistant professor at Rutgers for labor studies, and he's a member of Democratic Socialists of America and Organized Workers. So this is a real voice for the working class guys. But he made a really good point about how in the USSR, they had very low extreme wealth inequality. This is actually something I really appreciate about Greta Thunberg. And for those who don't know, Greta Thunberg is a heroic, brave climate justice activist. And you know, whenever climate change gets brought up, climate change. You know, I mentioned this on a previous video. For those who don't know, 97% of scientists agree that the only way to stop climate change is to end capitalism. And if I recall correctly, I think I showed an article from The Guardian, but it seems like more are catching up to this, acknowledging the fact that the only way to stop climate change is to stop capitalism. This is an article from Salon magazine from Jeremy Lent, titled Solving the Climate Crisis Requires the End of Capitalism.
You're goddamn right.
There was also an article in the Seattle Times from August titled The Climate Crisis is Also a Crisis of Capitalism.
You're goddamn right.
And then there was another article on this website called The Wire talking about how the IPCC warns that capitalism is unsustainable. Yeah. And then you have Jacobin Magazine, a magazine for the working class. Kate Aronoff talks about how capitalism cannot fix the climate crisis. Yeah, but this is why I find Greta Thunberg so inspiring, because she's not afraid to speak truth to power.
Are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Yeah, guys, how dare you? This is what I keep saying. I don't want to hear about your money and your economy when we have to save the planet from climate change. 97, this is the scientific consensus.
How dare you pretend that this can be solved with just business as usual and some technical solutions?
Yeah, guys, we don't want to hear about your technical solutions or your economy or your money. We have a democracy to save, and this is why we need less capitalism and more democracy. We need a system that truly works in the interests of the majority by imposing the will of the people. I mean, why do you think democratic socialists call themselves Democratic Socialists of America? Why do you think an equal society like North Korea calls itself the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea? Even Second Thought, even going back to Second Thought's video, even he touches upon the issue of democracy.
And it's not like we couldn't afford more humanitarian policies. It would just mean corporations wouldn't make as much money, and that's a deal breaker under capitalism. Another key part of socialist ideology is democracy. Democracy is about as American as apple pie.
Yeah, guys, yeah. Democracy is, it's as American as apple pie, you guys. A lot of neoliberal bootlickers like to claim that America was founded on freedom and individual rights and free markets, when actually America was meant to be a democracy. Even Brian Tyler Cohen, another voice, real hero for the working class. Brian Tyler Cohen talked about this recently.
C is actually antithetical to what the framers wanted. The framers favored majority rule. There were only a few instances where the framers actually wanted a supermajority, and they specified those instances clearly, like ratifying treaties, amending the Constitution, and convicting an impeached president. In fact, we don't have to guess what the framers thought about this because they literally said it.
Yeah, they literally said it.
James Madison, the father of the Constitution, wrote that requiring a supermajority would mean, quote, in all cases where
Yeah, guys, yeah. The founding fathers actually wanted majority rule. Yeah, and you know, this is something that's been talked about lately. About, you know, you have institutions. You have world-class accredited learning institutions like the Gravel Institute, talking about how the Senate is fundamentally opposed to democracy. You guys know why the Senate actually exists? You know why the Senate actually exists? It's because at the Constitutional Convention, the greedy corporations and the top 1% with their lobbyists and their money, bought off some of the framers of the Constitution. I mean, think about it, guys. Top 1%. I mean, 1%. It's a minority of the population. Just doing the math, it's not that hard. Yeah. Of course, the top 1% would want a chamber of Congress that makes them equal to the majority. And that's not good. That's not good. But what is good is that institutions, people are starting to realize how undemocratic the system is. And it's not just the Gravel Institute. We have people like Stephen Colbert and Senator Elizabeth Warren talking about this.
With Senator Elizabeth Warren, if you can't get rid of the filibuster, what about, and just hear me out here and try to hear this objectively.
I'm ready.
What if we just get rid of the Senate?
Yeah. It's undemocratic, you guys.
And I'm 100% serious here. It is the most anti-democratic institution next to the judiciary, because the judiciary is only the way it is because the Senate is the way it is. No one would drop a single tear. You've already got tenure. You can go back to your old job. You'll be fine. Spend more time with Bailey and Bruce, okay?
Yeah, guys, I think it's time we get rid of the Senate. It's so undemocratic, you guys. So undemocratic, and that's not good. That's not good.
You believe in getting rid of the filibuster when you're in the majority, and you believe in getting rid of the filibuster when you're in the minority. I'm not there to say by the filibuster I want to protect myself. I'm there to say this is how democracy is supposed to work. Protect the right of people to vote, and I'll take my chances. Every 6 years, every 2 years in the House, every 4 years in the White House. That's how democracy is supposed to work. Put these big issues up. Let's vote on them.
Yeah, let's vote on all the big issues, you guys. And yeah, I know Elizabeth Warren, she's not an ideal hero of the working class. After all, she still calls herself a capitalist. She still calls herself a capitalist, but I imagine she just does that. I imagine Senator Warren just calls herself a capitalist because American voters have had their consent manufactured by the establishment into thinking that socialism and democracy are dirty words. Yeah, you guys. Socialism! But Senator Warren seems more hell-bent than most politicians on shaking down the billionaire class. She's really adamant about imposing a new wealth tax. But most importantly, Senator Warren wants to make society more democratic. You know, imagine if we finally got rid of the Senate. How many wonderful things we as a society could accomplish without the top 1% obstructing us. You know, maybe America could finally catch up with the rest of the world by declaring food a human right. I mean, look at this. This was brought to my attention, I guess. The UN voted to make food a human right, and the only two countries to oppose this were the United States and Israel.
No surprise there.
That's not good. That's not good. And people still say America is the greatest country in the world. Look at this map, you guys. Look at all the countries in South America, in Africa, in the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. They're probably all eating a lot better than most Americans outside of the top 1%. Yeah. Yeah, that's how stuff works, you guys. If you want everyone in society to have something, you have to declare it a human right. then it magically comes into existence for everyone. Of course, a lot of neoliberal bootlickers, they try to criticize democracy, like this guy from the Ayn Rand Center.
The majority can impose in a democracy its will over the minority. And it has, whether it is penalizing Socrates for corrupting the youth.
Yeah, why should Socrates be allowed to corrupt the youth? Imagine if ancient Greece did not vote to kill Socrates. He would have corrupted the youth even more. Do we as a society really want people corrupting the youth with misinformation and propaganda? We need more democracy so that we can preserve our public education system and save it from these fascist parents who are trying to dictate what is taught in the schools these days. Who do parents think they are trying to have a say in what their kids learn? I thought the Michigan Democratic Party said it best. The Michigan Democratic Party said it best. Right here, as you can see. The purpose of a public education in a public school is not to teach kids only what parents want them to be taught. It is to teach them what society needs them to know. The client of the public school is not the parent, but the entire community and the entire public. Yeah, I'm really just tired. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really just tired of parents in general thinking they get to raise their kids. Who do they think they are? I think Melissa Harris Perry said it best. For those who don't know, Melissa Harris Perry, she's a professor who teaches at institutions like Wake Forest and Princeton. Former host on MSNBC. I thought she made a really good point about this topic.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours.
Yeah.
And totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children.
Yeah, they're our children.
So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities.
Yeah, kids belong to whole communities.
Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investment.
Yeah, this is the only way to move forward, you guys. Get with the program. Yeah, you know, we really need to do away with all this talk about my private life and my individualism. We are just members of the community. If everyone just thought of themselves as an individual with, just acting on their own self-interest, society would fall apart real fast. It's kind of like what this organization called Go Left US, which claims to be pushing the US left, real voice for the working class, by uplifting left-wing voices, almost 90,000 followers on Twitter. They had a really good point about this. They said that society's better when we come together. Think of it like a bundle of sticks in this picture. Apes together, strong.